Hello there. In this video, we should see how to instantiate a data table object, add data to this data table, and then retrieve the data from the data table and display it on a web page. To do so, let's go to the code behind page. Okay, over here, let's create our data table. So let's name our data table as books. New data table. Let's give the data table a name. Okay. So right now we have created a data table object called as books. To this, we need to add data columns which define the type of data our data table holds. So let's create a data column. We'll the first one as book ID, new data column, and give the name of the column. Next, we need to specify the type. So book ID is of type integer. Next, give it a caption which sets the caption for the column. Let's call it as book ID. Select forward slashes. Next, this one checks whether the value in the column is can be set to null or not. So right now we are saying it's false. That means do not allow null. Why? Because it's an ID, so we'll be using it as a primary key, and that's the reason why it can't be null. Okay, expression, we shall be seeing it later on. Max length you'll be using, well, if it's for string type, we shall be using it in next for the book name. And we set whether it's unique. Show it in the description. Equals true. It's a set value that indicates whether values in each row or column row of the column should be unique. Since we're going to set this as a primary key to book ID, it should be set to true. So this is how you define a data column with all the properties. And now finally we need to add this data column columns dot add of book ID. So now we have inserted one column into our data table. Similarly, let's add another column. Let's call it title. Set the data type. So the max length title, say 35 characters, and then let's add this. So now we have added the book title to our data table. Once this is done, next let's proceed and set the primary key for our table. So that would be our table name, that's books dot primary key. So it needs a data column array, gets a set array of columns that function as primary keys for the data table. So we do that, new data column of book ID, which is our column name, which we need to set as a primary key. So now we have a data table set ready to receive the data. To insert the data, we need to add rows to it. So we can do it directly as simple as this, say books dot rows dot add of the book ID and book title. Let's say Aragon. Okay, so we have inserted one row. So let's insert one more row. To another of my favorite books, let's say Born Identity by Robert Ludlum. Okay, so now we have created our data table and we have defined the column, and we have also added the rows, that is the data, into the data table. Next, we need to retrieve this data and display it in the web page. To do that, let's add a grid to a web page. Okay, once we've done that, all we need to do is set the data source to our data table, and then we call the data bind method. Let's build it, and then let's test this in a browser. So there you have it. Book ID 1 Aragon, book ID 2 Born Identity.